I am so glad you convinced me that the family car should be the Defender 110. It is so beautiful inside, it's so comfortable, and it just feels indestructible.
Yes, it really is. I've been waiting a long time for the new model to come out. The Defender 110, I'm telling you, it's my favorite car of all times. It's my third one. You know, I have stories of going off-road. The guy managed the group. He was like, what are you doing in this beautiful car? I'm like, I'm going off-road. He's like, are you sure? Because you can use one of ours. And then they look like Mad Max cars. I'm like, no, we're going to do this. And he was shocked.
Wow. Well, it's great because the Defender has been reimagined for 21st century adventure, and its unparalleled off-road ability as well as its robust interior are invaluable whether you're headed towards uncharted territory or just a weekend of exploration. The Defender 110 tackles challenging surroundings with absolute confidence. The SUV conveys strength outside and in, featuring peerless technology like an intuitive driver display and an award-winning infotainment system. That's my favorite part, to keep you connected no matter where the journey takes you. Adventure is unique to everyone, and so is the Defender. Choose from the two-door Defender 90, the four-door Defender 110, or the larger Defender 130 with the ability to seat up to 8 passengers. You'll find uncompromising performance in all three. So pack up and go even further with the Defender 110. Learn more at LandRoverUSA.com/Defender.
Capella University is rethinking higher education. With its game-changing FlexPath learning format, you can earn your degree on your schedule and fit your education seamlessly into your life. Imagine your future differently at capella.edu.
This isn't your average business podcast, and he's not your average host. This is the James Altucher Show on the Choose Yourself Network. Today on the James Altucher Show.
People who are stuck in a corporate environment have a certain mindset, and I'll be very.
But they don't have to be.
Like they don't have to be, but I'll push them, and they're like, "Steve, I'm miserable. You don't understand." I'm like, I kind of do know. Well, I like to say, like, again, if you put a plant in a jar, it's going to take the shape of a jar. If you put it in a room, maybe it takes the shape of the whole room, and it blooms even more than you'd ever like it to bloom.
Well, and again, if you're an employee, there's so many things you could gain being an employee.
Yes.
But you might not be an employee at the right place. Like if I had taken a job at JP Morgan, that would not have been good for me. I would have been stuck forever being like an IT guy somewhere. I would have gone crazy.
Yeah.
So money is not the key, particularly when you're young and don't have as many responsibilities. The key is being able to, set your environment up so that you're a plant in the room instead of a plant in the jar. Steve, what are you doing on your phone?
Oh.
We're doing a podcast here. You can't.
I know exactly.
Multitasking actually does not work. Have you ever found multitasking to actually work?
No, actually it doesn't. No, I'm saying this as I'm juggling right now, and I'm not doing either one well.
I'll give you my statistical. First off, the brain is structured like it's almost like a computer,
right?
As our guest Sam Harris pointed out to us today. But it's like a single processor computer. You can really only focus on one thing at a time, and any interruption will decrease performance of everything that you're trying to do something. And my statistical evidence is if I am playing chess online and then I get a phone call and I still keep playing chess, I immediately, chess is all ranked statistically. My performance is about 2 standard deviations lower, meaning that me playing chess while on the phone should lose to the me not playing chess, not on the phone, about 3 out of 4 times.
Well, I have 2 things to say that. One, if we were computers, I would be the Univac and you would be the MacBook Air or Dell.
MacBook Air? What? I'm the NVIDIA G280X.
It speaks to my point
gaming,
exactly. I can't even. My brain is so slow. I couldn't even think of the most up-to-date computer.
That's the chip that determines it.
Oh, is that what it is? Okay. See again. No, I could see that, which also brings me to the point about chess, where Gary Kasparov said that. What did he say? Which he said this on Jordan Harbinger's podcast about your chess ability, which I thought was a diss, but it was actually a compliment.
Well, it could have been either way, but he said that computers are better than him the way he is better than me, which is a fair assessment. The computers are like massively. Computers should be able to. When on our podcast, Gary said computers can beat Magnus Carlsen like 9.5 out of 10 games.
Right. Wow.
And that's if Magnus Carlsen is specifically trying for a draw in the 10th game. He might be able to get a draw as opposed to trying for a win. So it's a little easier to try for a draw. So if he was trying for a draw every game, he might be able to draw 1 out of 10 and lose the rest.
I feel like that's like Wally Green versus me in ping pong versus me and Jay in ping pong.
Look, I'm multitasking. My phone was ringing.
Like Wally Green would be me 9.5 out of 10 times, even with his phone, and I would be Jay. Like
no, Wally Green would beat you 10 out of 10 times, even if he was
Where
playing
are you,
with
Wally?
a brick.
Come back, Wally.
On ping pong. Wally's been on the podcast. He's also been in North Korea and did not get killed doing it. He played ping pong there. But
you all saw me play Jay in Baltimore, and it was a massacre. No offense, Jay.
Right. So
sorry to insult you, Jay.
I tweeted out on Twitter for everybody to ask me questions. There's a lot of great questions that people ask me, which we'll answer. But we're going to be playing around with this format where, once a week, Steve and I are just hanging out, answering questions, and talking about some fun things. But before I answer the questions, I got that email again today from Google, which says it's from Google Maps, and the email specifically says, "Hey, look back at here's your February in review. Look back on the past month and reminisce about recent trips and past places." And then it shows the map, the Google Maps, everywhere I've been. It's a little creepy.
It seems to me, though, like you must be one of their easiest customers because other than the trip to California, everywhere you go is within a block radius.
Well, yeah, because then you can open it up and you can click on a day.
Wow.
And like literally, so I clicked on a random day. I clicked on Friday, January 25th, and literally all of my movements are within one block. So basically at 8:4, and it tells you everything. At 8:14 a.m., I walked 0.1 miles.
See, don't point the finger, point the thumb. Worry about yourself. You're the one on the phone. You're multitasking. I don't know why it's
doing that. My ringtone is it was just vibrating.
Okay.
I'm just throwing this phone away. So January 25th, at 8, if it was a Friday, this was my day. Apparently, I walked 0.1 miles to Irving Farm, the cafe. And then I was there from 8:16 a.m. to 12:35 p.m.
Wow.
Sitting at this cafe. Then I walked the 374 feet to home.
Wow.
And then I guess I was home until the next event, which is at 7:42 p.m. I walked to Burke and Will's, which is the restaurant right next to Irving Farm Cafe. So also 0.1 miles. And at 9:11 p.m., I walked home. That was my entire day on January 25th. So and apparently during the month, I walked about 10 miles for the whole month, but that's probably because I was in London and LA, which there was a lot more walking.
Yeah.
I walk a little more than I usually do, but 10 miles is only like what? Like I divided by 30 days. So 10 miles is about, 50,000 feet. So divided by 30 days. So I walked about, it's like 1,500 feet a day, 1,600 feet a day.
If you're supposed to,
I walk basically. It's like walking back and forth on my block twice every day.
Well, first of all, there's a lot of things that you can unpack with that. I mean, you're not even worried about the invasion of privacy. You're worried about what it reveals about you.
Yeah,
about how
I'm a lazy sack of shit.
Well, I try and walk like 5 miles a day at least, which is more than 10,000 steps. So meaning if you're supposed to walk 10,000 steps,
at 5 miles,
you need to walk like 140 miles more a month than you already have.
Well, 5 miles is what? That's like 26,000 feet.
Right.
So how many feet is in a step?
I think
like 3.
No, that's a good question.
Can we Google it?
Yes, but I feel like if 280 feet isn't a mile, right? And then I don't know.
Yeah. It's 5 miles, like
so
26.
I feel like.
Oh, yeah. So an average stride length is 2.2 feet. So let's just, but for no, 2.5 feet for men. Let's just say it's 3 feet. So, let's just say 2.5 feet. So that's
To bottom line it, you're not really exercising.
Yeah, you're right. That's about 10,000 steps that 5 miles.
Exactly.
So, yes, I am not exercising, but I was in, according to the Google Maps here for the past month, I was in London, New York, and LA. So I did travel halfway around the world during the month.
But yeah, by plane.
By plane.
But like, no, but
I walk a lot on that plane.
Yeah.
I go to the bathroom a lot.
Exactly. But, and then.
You want to not get dehydrated
to Big
on
Ben,
the plane.
to Parliament, Trafalgar Square. No, but what I was going to say, like, I don't get those same emails from Google.
Yeah, so I wonder,
Sergey,
I'm not, like,
you
when
know,
I've
why aren't
asked,
you emailing me? I feel slighted.
I've asked a lot of people. I'm the only one who gets this email, and
Yeah,
I
I don't
don't think
know
I
why.
signed up for it or something anything. And it's coming from Google Maps. And by the way, here's what's interesting. They also know they've identified my home as home.
Yes.
So I think they must get part of their data from Uber.
Oh,
'Cause,
yeah.
How would they know that address is my home? I've only listed it as home with Uber.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
I don't really use that many apps. I use Google Maps and
Well,
that's it.
It's interesting because
Uber.
this is also a conversation you should have with Roger McNamee, who's going to be coming back. But, his whole book was about the invasiveness of Facebook. And I feel like it's all those companies,
But
obviously.
this is not necessarily a bet. Like, here's the thing, too. What's the pros and cons of this? So the cons, obviously,
You don't
know,
walk
if
anywhere.
they can predict my behavior. Well, but I don't know. Maybe Irving Farm can call you. Hey, we haven't seen
Yeah.
you lately. Here's a 20% discount if you come again.
Yeah.
So it's not so bad for me to let my privacy go to
Sure.
people who might benefit from the relationship with me, and then they want to continue that, even if it's a business relationship. And
It's
the
bad
other-
for Jussie Smollett because
Is that
he
how
had
they-
those Nigerian brothers and they found him from Uber,
Oh, really?
Yeah, they
That his Uber results were weird.
Their Uber was at that place at 2:00 in the morning on those streets. So
That's just
how-
like Alexa. Everybody says, "Oh,
Yeah.
Alexa's not really listening to you,"
Yeah.
but they used Alexa to because Alexa is all the time listening to you. They used
Yeah.
Alexa in a court case to solve a murder.
yeah,
So, but the other thing is, I kind of like the fact that, I maybe should be a little more active.
Sure.
But the other thing is, there is a reason why I was in a cafe for 5 straight hours, which is I write every morning until I don't write, until I have something written. So it took me 5 hours to write that day. And then I went home and rested and did
Yeah.
business calls probably, and were read for preparing for a podcast. And then I went out to dinner. It was
and
a Friday night.
you a lot of times like to go to a cafe, like, or
To write,
coffee.
yeah.
Yeah, you really do. Yeah, because I remember other people have talked about that. Like, different people have different process, but you don't mind.
No, sometimes it's actually less distracting than being at home. Because at home, I have
Yeah.
all my toys. At the
Yeah.
cafe, you can't even get up, really.
Yeah.
You have to just sit. I bring 3 books always.
Wow.
And I bring the computer, and I don't really bring the phone. And I read from all 3 books, and then I might write down my list of ideas for the day, and then I'll write. And then I'll sit there until I've written something or until I completely give up. So
What was one of your ideas today? Walk more than 0.1 miles a day.
no, my ideas for today were things I think suck about entrepreneurship.
Oh wow!
So everyone.
Yeah.
I was on some Facebook group, and this might be related to one of the questions later. So I was on this Facebook group, and everybody was saying things like, there was somebody asked a question, "What does entrepreneurship mean to you?" And people had these corny answers like value, options, freedom, and I just thought this was such bullshit. Like, entrepreneurship. When I first started a company, my very first company in the 90s, it was so hard. It wasn't about, of course it's a little about value because no one's going to pay for something you do unless you're providing value. But it was so much more than value. Like, you had to sell somebody because there was plenty of competitors. My business was making websites at a time when there was no websites out there. There was a ton of competitors. So it wasn't just about providing value. It was about providing value and education, and which I guess you could argue is value, but also communication. They didn't know what was happening, so I had to always update them. And then it was dealing with their personalities, which was incredibly difficult. In those types of agency-like businesses, the clients are just usually really annoying. Sorry for all my ex-clients from that time. And it was also like then you have to manage employees in many businesses, not in all businesses. So at some point, two of your employees are going to start having sex with each other, and that is a drag. You have to deal with the emotional carnage of that, both internally with your other employees and with the clients that those employees were dealing with it. That's a drag. And then there was just other things that were just
So
super
what
much a
prompted
drag.
you to talk about the downsides of entrepreneurship?
Well, because everybody was saying, "Oh, it's all about freedom
Yeah,
and
oh,
having
yeah.
my own control and having options over my life and being good to others." When that was not my experience of entrepreneurship at all. Like, it showed me that most people don't really. They have this kind of glorified view of what entrepreneurship is. Like, I'm going to quit my job and be an entrepreneur, which is not a bad idea, but you have to kind of know honestly what you're facing. So I kind of wanted to be
And-
honest about it
and
for
in-
these, so
in-
people who are reading
Yeah,
this
of
thread
course.
really know.
And in your book, Choose Yourself, you talk about entrepreneurship, right? I mean, like, explain the impetus for writing that, because that in some ways glorified entrepreneurship to a lot of people, right?
Yes and no, and then I had to correct that. I wrote another book called The Rich Employee, because you could still choose yourself by being an employee. There's many happy employees out there, and employees, if they provide, it actually often is easier to get rich as an employee who provides a lot of value and rises up in either their company, or they keep getting hired at new companies. And I thought it was really important to just honestly express what real entrepreneurship is about, and not lifestyle entrepreneurship either, where I talk a lot about different strategies for making money just on your own, but like real entrepreneurship, where you're building a company and there's employees and there's a service or a product you offer. That's like really things are going wrong all of the time, like, and they're unexpected. Like, for instance, I remember with my first business, we had a deal to sell the company, and the main obstacle, and you wouldn't expect this, the main obstacle was my landlord. Because when you sell your company, the landlord is going to have a new tenant. You're no longer the tenant. The company buying you is the tenant.
Right.
And so the landlord has to actually approve of you selling your company.
Oh, wow.
And he knows what kind of power he has. He knows nothing is really at stake for him.
Right.
But he knows millions of dollars are at stake for you.
Wow.
And so that was so enormously stressful. Like, literally, my partner and I, it was like we were going to have heart attacks every day, because the landlord was not only not signing the document, but threatening to kick us out unless we did this. And so it's a big effort to deal with every issue.
But I think what this speaks to too is that aphorism, like, there's no greater zealot than the recent convert, right? So some of those people are expressing the enthusiasm of people who haven't done it. And I think that's the story they need to tell themselves, to glamorize it more, to embolden them. Because if we looked at all that stuff and said, well, you're going to do this, that, the other, you do have to just kind of dive in.
But even like day one, so day one, the business had already started, and I was already running it on the side, but I had my full-time job for like a year and a half. Finally quit my full-time job because it looked like we'd have enough clients to be really big and successful. Get to work that first day where I'm full-time. I've quit my great job at HBO and was working now full-time at my company. It's called Reset. And the first phone call I make was to our new biggest client, the intermediary, and the intermediary is like, "Oh, no, I didn't mean it."
Oh, wow.
Like, they're not. Don't worry about them. They're bad. You don't want them as a client. And I was like, "Steve," his name was Steve. "Steve, I just quit my job because you told me this. You said it was definite." And he's like, "No, I never said that."
Wow.
And he did. He was just a creepy guy. And I remember I went out to lunch a little while later, and I was like crying at lunch, like, what did I just do? And so from the very first day, for the next 15 years of my entrepreneurial life, was just, I don't want to say it was miserable. It's really, really hard. Like, yes, you can't even say you're your own boss, because you have to manage employees, which means to some extent the employees are your boss a little bit, and you have to manage your clients are certainly your boss, particularly we were like a B2B, but we were selling to other businesses, not consumers. your partners, you have to make sure they're good. Potential investors, you have to make sure all the time they're good. I mean, there was so many times, so many Fridays, and it's interesting that it was always Friday. It wasn't like random chance. Friday at like 4:50 p.m., somebody would leave a voicemail message for me, like a client. James, please call me back. Really important, really upset. And then I'd get the message at like 5:01.
Wow.
I'd call them back right away. Oh no, my second biggest client is really upset. Oh, 5:01 p.m. They're at a corporate job. They're gone for the
Wow.
weekend. There's no way to get a hold of them. And I have to, all weekend long, I'm thinking, oh, are we going out of business? Am I going to have to fire employees until Monday morning? They're like, can you fix this comma on the website? It should be a period. And
But having been on the other side of the fence, now I will say wherever you go, you take yourself with you. You know, when I read your, again, great book, Choose Yourself. If you want to buy one, listeners, call me. I'll sell it to you. But, when you work, and I worked in television for a long time, and I recall, you talk about choosing yourself, and I didn't always feel like I could choose myself.
Correct.
I'd come in at 6 a.m. I wouldn't get a lot of sleep. I would have been very much reactive to the news of the day. Today,
Right,
I think about it all the time. Like if I were there today, I would have been pursuing people about Luke Perry or something with AOC, rest in peace, to him. But, any of the urgent news stories that were happening, and I would have felt like I didn't have as much control. I would have been around people I might not have wanted to be around.
So let's define freedom for a second as the percentage of your decisions every day that are yours, that you fully are kind of signed up for, as opposed to decisions that are made for you that you don't like. So if you have a boss, the boss might say to you, Steve, get on this Luke Perry thing. And you might think, 6 a.m, who am I going to call out? So you might, and let's say if 80% of your day decisions are yours, that might be a good example of a day of freedom.
Yes.
And, but then you have to decide, well, how can I structure my work accordingly? Now, when you're young, you might not be able to, but as you get more and more experienced and more of an expert at your job, then you have more and more freedom. Like I bet you your job as a TV producer 3 years ago was better than 20 years ago.
Yeah.
So you probably have more freedom. Now, the other thing is you can also, you choose the industry you're going to be in.
Sure.
When you work in TV, the news, there's only 3 or 4 local stations for news.
Yeah.
So you're very limited as to your choices. So your goal when you're choosing yourself is to increase your supply, diversify the supply of your choices. So there's more demand for you.
And let's broaden it out for other people listening in any industry, right? So in any industry, if you're an accountant, if you don't just have to work for the Big Five, or you're a lawyer, right?
Or like if you're a lawyer, constantly try to learn. So maybe you can jump to your own practice, or maybe a smaller, more nimble law firm with big clients that you like and can get along with. So as you get older and as you get better and better at providing value, whether you're an entrepreneur or an employee, you'll have more and more choices because people realize you have value. So your demand for you goes up, and demand for you was probably very high.
Yeah.
And which is,
why I'm here. Hallelujah. The words of James Taylor. That's why I'm here.
And you did move into an industry where you had more freedom and more
and diversity of choices. I'd kill myself tomorrow. So this has been a great experience. Hopefully we'll continue.
I think choosing yourself could be like 60-70% entrepreneurship, but there's different types of entrepreneurship too. There's starting a company with lots of employees, or there's looking every day on Alibaba and seeing what, cheap marshmallow sticks and selling them on Amazon for 10 times as much, which one of the people I interviewed for one of my newsletters made over $1 million doing that exact thing.
Amazing.
So that's entrepreneurship as well. There's different kinds of entrepreneurship. But I think people were kind of I just saw through this thread on Facebook, people were just ignoring all the problems of entrepreneurship. And you can't be successful if you're only looking towards the sun. You have to look towards the night as well.
It brings to mind, Ben Horowitz wrote a great book, The Hard Thing About Hard Things. And he talks about all the struggles he had into becoming, the huge powerhouse he
Right,
is.
right. And I read that book. It was a great book. He had every advantage also. He was building
Yeah.
his company during the internet boom. And to be fair to
He
him,
had some wind at his back.
so he had wind at his back when he was starting the company. So he was able to raise an enormous amount of money. Now, to be fair, the internet bust then happened. And that was a big part of the struggle, is that people stopped. He had to pivot several times, but he had raised a lot of money in an
Yeah.
IPO and from venture capital funds. So he was able to, then when he had the hard moments, he had cash to kind of, he had the insight to sort of tread
Yeah.
water a little bit while he pivoted, and then eventually sold the company. So it's good. He started off at the right time, and then he made the right decisions along the way. But that was a good example of the enormous stress that he had, because he had investors, shareholders, clients who were bailing on him, employees who were bailing on him, and who were depressed. He was depressed. He had lost an enormous amount of money. So, but that was a good example of, even when the wind is at your back and everything is going for you, and he had already made money previously doing other things. So he had everything going for him, and it's still incredibly difficult. So I'm not saying don't be an entrepreneur. When I made this list, and the list included other things, I mentioned the clients calling at 5 p.m.
Fraternizing among clients.
Among employees. I mentioned kind of the constant. It's 24 hours a day you're feeling fear.
Yeah.
Because when you're an employee, you leave your work at the office. When you're an entrepreneur, there's no distinguishing between the office and home. The business is in your head, so you're always carrying it with you. I don't regret being an entrepreneur. It kind of hardened me. It's like the fire that sharpens a sword, or whatever, however you sharpen a sword. I don't know.
Yeah, sure.
But I just wanted to kind of not delude the people on this thread that it's all fun and games, and it's all about freedom and then eventual riches and money and happiness, because otherwise everybody would do it and everyone would succeed at it, and it's a very difficult thing to do. And to your point, choosing yourself often is about entrepreneurship, but you can also do it as an employee. When I was an employee, my title was junior programmer analyst in the IT department at HBO. Did that stop me from doing anything? No, I shot a TV pilot that HBO's documentaries paid for. I was in charge of HBO's website, and then that let me do all these I pitched them this idea of doing web shows. I was producing all these web shows. So I still made of it what I could, given my title, my lowly title, and the initial responsibilities I had, which I ignored to do these other things, and I chose myself to do these other things. I went to HBO to pitch TV shows, and I pitched TV shows, even though I got in through the back door, which was the IT department.
Yeah, no, I think that's very true. I think a lot of life obviously is how you choose to view it. Obviously, right? It's kind of like, don't wish it were easier, wish you were better, and you have to kind of deal with it. But yes, I think there's a way that every single person has to view what they're doing.
Wait, what was that? I'm going to write down your quotes. Don't wish it were easy.
Don't wish it were easier, wish you were better. I think that's definitely very important. And I'll tell people that,
also, I sorry to interrupt. I always interrupt. The other thing is, too, there's always, this just reminded me of it. There's always a back door to what you really want to do in life. So this is why it doesn't necessarily matter entrepreneurship versus employee. There's always a back door. Like, I wanted to eventually do more creative things, but I didn't know how to break into that. But I was already a good software guy, so I figured the back door is to be a software guy at an entertainment company.
Right.
And by the way, J.P. Morgan also offered me a job at the same time. They offered me double my salary at HBO. So HBO offered me, I was making $27,600 a year in Pittsburgh. HBO offered me $40,000. Then J.P. Morgan offered me $80,000.
Wow.
And I turned J.P. Morgan down to work at HBO because I was serious about my freedom and how I wanted it and how I loved entertainment and storytelling and so on. And by the way, I loved HBO. At the time, they had the Larry Sanders Show, Dream On, many other good shows.
It wasn't TV, it was HBO.
It was, well, no. Actually, that saying didn't start for another year.
Oh, James is the one who came up with it.
No, but I remember Eric Kessler, who was the head of HBO marketing, did a presentation.
He stole it from me when I was at lunch.
No, but I remember, this is also very important for being the rich employee, is that most of my friends in the IT department, they never left the IT department. They didn't even know, they didn't watch any HBO shows.
That doesn't defy the stereotype.
The-
Playing Dungeons and Dragons.
well, no, they would play Doom all the time, which was the shoot 'em up
close
game at the
enough.
time. Jay remembers Doom, right?
Yes.
Yep.
It's like, and now the equivalent would be Fortnite or something like that.
Jay knows all about that.
But I was the only guy who would constantly. We were even in a separate building. We were in the Grace building right next to the HBO building. We're the only department in a separate building, and I was all the time going into the HBO building. There was always and so one time they announced a seminar. Eric Kessler, who was head of marketing at HBO, was going to give a seminar how they came up with it's not TV, it's HBO, because they had just released it. And I would go to things like that just to learn why he did that, what they looked at, how they studied it. And so I was immersing myself not just in IT for HBO, but in the whole industry.
I actually felt the same way when I started at WCBS Radio, and it was definitely empowering to me to look at it like I was a graduate student, you know?
That's a good way to look at it.
And I remember like John Wooden, who I've cited often, but he always felt like I see myself as a teacher rather than a boss because it's empowering and you feel better when you're in a situation of learning. And when I was at CBS, I definitely, I worked in the polling department. I worked at WCBS Radio. I worked at CBS Sports. And you did have a lot of opportunity. If you really wanted to go after it, you could. And I definitely knew everybody all around CBS. I got to meet people. And this was when I was just starting. And, so I definitely think it informed me. And I think it was healthier to look at it that way. At that point in my life, I was in my 20s and I looked at it like, oh, I might be in graduate school like some other people. And I remember resenting a lot of people the same way I probably do now, all these years later, because they would be talking to their friends and they felt like it gave them status, like, oh, I'm at CBS or whatever. And I felt like, you're not Edward R. Murrow. You're just here and you're not really killing it. The same way now, influenced perhaps by Choose Yourself, when I see a lot of these people and you see people where we're supposed to feel like, oh, you work at JP Morgan, you work at Goldman Sachs, you work at William Morris, you work at all these McKinsey. And I think it confers some degree of there's a brand there, but I also feel, and this is what I think you and I can realize, it's like I've heard that expression, like people are either tractors or trailers, right? So people are either like being pulled by other people or they're the ones pulling. And I've always tried to be the kind of person to, be a change maker, be an influencer and be somebody, okay, I'm going to come wherever I go, I'm going to make a difference. And we all should aspire to be that way.
These days, we're all investors, trying to be smart with our money despite our worst impulses. But at iShares, we believe that deep down inside of every investor is a better investor. One that's just waiting to be let out. Explore iShares ETFs and insights and let your best investor out. Visit iShares.com for more information.
You know what I love about fantasy sports is that even though I'm not going to be a great basketball player or a baseball player or a football player or whatever, I feel like I get to participate and make decisions and use my knowledge of these different leagues or these different sports to compete. So it's like I can pick my team or I can pick my favorite players and I could use my knowledge to make predictions and maybe even make money. So with the basketball season here, you can now pick combo projections across football and basketball from the Specials League on Prize Picks. This is a league created specifically for combo projections that include two or more players from different sports or leagues. Want to play alongside some of Prize Picks' favorite players like rapper Meek Mill and comedian Andrew Schultz, who's also been a guest on this podcast, and I've been a guest on his? You can now find community plays under the promos tab of the app to view entries for some of the biggest names in the Prize Picks community each week. Look, Prize Picks even offers a reboot policy so that your entries stay in play even if one of your players gets injured. For football and basketball games, if you have a player who exits the game in the first half and does not return in the second, that player is rebooted. Prize Picks is the only daily fantasy sports platform with an injury insurance policy. What? So, I love playing it. I love anywhere where I can use analytical ability with my interests to demonstrate some skill and maybe make some money, and I like the game-like aspect. I do wish they had chess as a category on prizepicks.com, but I'll settle for what they've got. Maybe I should make my own fantasy chess league. But in any case, I love Prize Picks. Go to prizepicks.com/James. Use code James for a first deposit match up to $100. That's the easiest $100 you're ever going to make. So that's prizepicks.com/James and use code James. Daily fantasy sports made easy. The future of learning is definitely online. Like, it's such BS that you have to spend $200,000 or take $200,000 in loans and go to some fancy school when it's useless. It doesn't guarantee you a job. Most employers, including me, do not care about degrees or grades or anything like that. We want to care that you love what you're doing, that you know what you're doing, in some cases that you have experience or that you're willing to learn. But people in general love learning and are curious. Like, the key to success is curiosity. And I think masterclass.com is the perfect model for online learning. I'm really happy they're sponsoring this episode. If you're going to give a gift, give the gift of learning. Masterclass makes a meaningful gift this season for you and anyone on your list, because both of you can learn from the best to become your best, from leadership to effective communication to cooking. Let me tell you some of the classes I've taken. I've taken comedy from Steve Martin. I mean, can you believe I can take a class from Steve Martin on comedy, or Judd Apatow, my favorite comedy director? I could take an actual class from him on writing. Wolfgang Puck on cooking. Dan Brown on writing, or Judy Bloom, who's been on this podcast, on writing. By the way, Wolfgang Puck also has been on this podcast. It's such a pleasure. I try to take classes all the time from masterclass.com. And whether you're watching Masterclass on TV or listening in audio mode in the app or on their site, the quality speaks for itself. It's like these Masterclass instructors are your own personal mentors that are going to help you reach the next level. How much would it cost to take one-on-one classes on comedy from Steve Martin or on chess from Gary Kasparov? You just wouldn't be able to do it. But it would cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. With a Masterclass annual membership, it's $10 a month. Memberships start at $120 a year for unlimited access to one-on-one classes with all 180 plus Masterclass instructors. So it's not just $120 for one instructor. You get all 180 plus Masterclass instructors. Boost your confidence and find practical takeaways you can apply to your life and at work. And if you own a business or are a team leader, use Masterclass to empower and create future-ready employees and leaders. That's the real education in today's world. So this holiday season, you can give one annual membership and get one free at masterclass.com/JAS. JAS, of course, stands for the James Altucher Show. So right now you can get two memberships for the price of one at masterclass.com/JAS. Masterclass.com/JAS. Offer terms apply. You can't just decide I'm going to be the tractor. You have to do things like, know the industry you're in.
Yeah.
So I could tell you, nobody in the IT department with me really understood the entertainment industry. They understood software, but they didn't understand the entertainment industry. Nobody knew who the other executives were. So I would study their biographies, like the head of sales at HBO. I read how in 1982, like 13 years earlier, or 12 years earlier, he had gone door to door in Mississippi.
Oh, wow.
I think it was after Showtime launched. I'm remembering this now from 25 years ago. But Showtime launched in Mississippi. HBO wanted to compete, of course. So he was door to door. And what they did was HBO spun off another channel, Cinemax. So now they could sell two things versus the guy going door to door for Showtime, who was just selling Showtime.
Oh, wow.
And it was this guy. The guy who I had read about was John Billick, who eventually became, for a while, I think he was the CEO of HBO, but when I was there, he was the head of sales, and very smart guy. But I was studying the biography of each person because I wanted my career at the time more to emulate theirs than an IT guy, because I was not really interested in IT. The other point I want to, and then the other thing I would do is, again, it wasn't so easy for me to just pitch TV shows, but since I pitched, I had to have a vision that was interesting to HBO. So this is the real way you be a tractor, is once I understood the lay of the land with the entertainment industry, there was this brand new thing that they didn't know about called the internet. I had to pitch to them what it meant for HBO. So now suddenly I created a space within HBO that I could fill. I became in charge of all of their internet strategies. So, and that's when I was able to do web shows, which caught the notice of the TV side, which became, I was trying to make it TV shows. But, it was, and then finally the other thing is that because we were doing the websites for all of their shows, I had this amazing opportunity. I got to meet the creators of all these shows. So, for instance, Spawn was an animated cartoon on HBO. I met Todd McFarlane, and he had created, what was it, Jay, Image Comics? Yes, well, Spawn was the cartoon on HBO, and actually at the same time, New Line was doing a movie, and my company did the website for that and the website for the HBO cartoon. But then I met Todd McFarlane, and he had such kind of presence and power because he had this whole vision about these superheroes, and he had created this company, and he had left Marvel because Marvel wasn't letting him choose himself, so he chose himself and created his own company and created Spawn and stole all the best drawers at cartoonists at Marvel. And I thought, I want to be like that guy. So because I got more exposure to the entertainment side through this back door, it gave me a better sense of what I wanted to do in many ways. Did I want to do internet? Did I want to do entertainment? Did I want to do some combination? My first company was basically a combination, and so on.
But I think what you're speaking of, it's like the same way it says, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, not happiness. Like we all have opportunities. Like, and I
That's a good
believe,
point.
and I believe that. So, like when these people see it, it's not like, oh, it's freedom. You have the ability to be freer than perhaps you would have been. But I think, ability is the poor man's wealth. So like if you have ability, people are always going to respond to you. And if you could provide value, and today for these young people out there, and every single show and department I see, it's people who know social media. Usually those gurus aren't 75-year-old people. They're 20-year-somethings.
But doesn't necessarily have to be, by the way. Doesn't necessarily have to be young.
No. But for the most part, it's younger people. No, and I'm not necessarily, we had Chip Conley on, who was terrific, talking about like being an elder and being concurrently, and, like an intern with the people at Airbnb after a great career in hotels, and also being a mentor to those people. So I think we all have to have that paradoxical kind of knowledge. But what I'm saying, it's like when I was at TV recently or anywhere, you see all these young people who come in from college, and some of the people who want to adapt, and we all have to adapt. I'm getting out of my comfort zone. I'm, and doing things I didn't necessarily think I wanted to do. I'll be on Twitter, folks. I'll let you know. James will let you know. But I think that a lot of these people who come out of college, you see social media coordinators, and they're coming in there. And if you're really good at it and you could help, let's say you're at Showtime or HBO, and you're that wizard who could connect the dots between Game of Thrones and their subscribers, then you're going to have access to all of those people. Like the better you are, the more opportunities you're going to have. So
Right,
I don't think it's an antiquated thing,
Right, and it's not so to your point, choosing yourself or let's just call it being successful and being successfully free, because for instance, if I had ended up at JP Morgan, or if you would have stayed in TV, we would have gotten better and better abilities at their narrow confines that we didn't want, but it wouldn't necessarily made us feel successful or free.
Sure.
But it's not just, what I was going to say is, it's not just ability. So for instance, my training was as a software guy, and when I went to HBO, I was working in the software department with 200 other software guys. So maybe I was as good as the average, or maybe a little better, but you couldn't necessarily say, and you couldn't even measure, is this guy a more successful programmer than the other 160 people? Maybe he's a little bit more, but not much. And I had to then get good at other things, A, understanding the rest of the business, B, understanding the entertainment industry. And then it's often the intersection where you can really, the intersection of your interests and what you pursue that really defines what you're the best at. So I was probably the best at the intersection of technology and just quote unquote HBO or the entertainment industry. And there's a guy. There's
And
this
your
book,
skill stack, like what
right.
Scott Adams has said. Yeah.
So Scott Adams talks about the skill stack. There's another guy who's very interesting. We haven't really talked about him. I
Yeah.
would like this guy on the podcast. But he wrote a book called The Formula, The Universal Laws of Success.
Oh, yeah.
Albert Laszlo Barabasi. Nassim
Okay.
Taleb is a quote on the back. And at first I'm reading it, and the laws seem kind of obvious, but he makes this really interesting point, and he uses sports as an example. So maybe you'll get this. He makes the interesting point that performance is bounded, but success is unbounded. So, for instance, Usain Bolt, he's only 0.1 seconds better
100%.
than his number two.
Yeah.
Nobody in the world knows his number two.
Yeah.
Everyone knows Usain Bolt, and he probably makes $10 million a year from endorsements, whereas the number two probably makes nothing. And so the performance is not. He's not that much better. It's just. But he's more successful. Why? He has a combination of persistence. He networks better than everybody. He shows up to every Olympics. He has this charisma. So there's a lot of components of success whereas ability is important, but it's only one of those components. You also have to have persistence and an ability to be in the right places. Like how many artists didn't show in the right galleries and might have been better than the artist that Gagosian was showing.
Yeah.
But Gagosian was the one who was able to, everybody looked for to say, oh, if Jasper Johns is with Gagosian, his paintings are worth millions, whereas this other guy, I don't know, even though he might be better.
Well, for sure. No, absolutely. And I think that's why you and I have spoken about just focusing on our actions rather than our outcomes, of we doing all we can to put ourselves in certain situations. And it's something that I remember the movie Match Point by Woody Allen talked about that. Like, what's the difference between the number one tennis player? What kind of bounce do you need to be rather than the 150th tennis player? And, speaking of speed, we see that in the NFL combines where they're measuring these people. Oh, I ran a 4.340. And people are like, do you know what the difference is between, like, if you were an actual person, it's not that different. There's the perception of it, and that's what you're focusing on. But for sure, I think there's a lot of factors that determine success.
I mean, a great example from, we've had Tony Hawk on the podcast.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, he has huge abilities. Won, the X Sports, for
Right.
X Games for skateboarding like 11 years in a row. But what's his real success was leveraging that and networking accordingly and having the good business people around him to get a good deal, helping Electronic Arts make Tony Hawk skateboarding games.
Well, look at George Foreman. I believe Dick Butkus was really offered that grill first, and George Foreman took it, and then he made hundreds of millions of dollars. Maria Sharapova makes a lot more money than Serena Williams off the tennis court, and some of it could be people's appeal. That Lolo Jones was a person who didn't even make the Olympics, and she was very appealing, and it happens with a lot of people. And so, sometimes life isn't fair. Sometimes it's not just correlated to ability. Anna Kournikova was somebody who was a tennis player, wasn't the best tennis player, but she had a combination of factors that made her very appealing.
And not only made her very appealing, but then everybody, like all the younger girls in her tennis facility, it was like a crappy tennis facility. They all of a sudden realized, oh, someone from here can be successful. So this guy also in the format, he talks about hotbeds of success. That facility became a hotbed of success. There were a lot of, top 100 players. There was zero at first. Then there was Anna Kournikova, and then there was dozens suddenly.
Yes.
And it's because it's the networking. Suddenly they were networking with her. They were networking with the right coaches, which attracts better and better talent, and talent inspires each other. And it also gave them permission to, I could do this too. So their ability, because performance is bounded and very small differences between the best and number 100, they were able to take that extra tiny microsecond to improve.
Interesting. Yeah, and I think Dan Coyle talks about that also, and he used the word like ignition. Like it's the ignition to, wow, we can do it too. And you see it. You saw that in 1980 when the U.S. Olympic hockey team won, and it got so much attention. All these Americans got more at hockey.
And the classic example is Roger Bannister on the 4-minute mile. As nobody thought it was physically possible. He does it, and within the next year, like a dozen other people do it.
Mm-hmm.
So, but all this is to say that ability alone would not have, my abilities were in software and I was good at it, but not necessarily like unbelievable, but that combined with networking so that I can, get into entrepreneurship and get clients, and persistence because entrepreneurship is extremely hard. Those things led to more success than my other fellow employees at the time.
Absolutely. No, and I feel the same way. Like when you're in TV, there were a lot of talented people and there were a lot of talented producers. I wasn't the best tape producer. I was definitely a strong booker. I was effective at it. I definitely had all the qualities that one would need. Like I had a lot of content. I was effective at it, but you might only be able to be, again, like if you visualize a marathon when there's 25,000 people there, I didn't have the escape velocity to necessarily, and you had to be competitive and collaborative with a lot of people here.
So that's interesting because I'm not going to criticize your old job. I'm just
for sure.
I'm just extrapolating. But not only is performance bounded for you, like, so obviously you're a great booker. You're the best booker in the podcast. There's other great podcasters I won't name. But basically every great podcaster out there has used your services.
You are the Honda Civic. You sell yourself. But I think.
But we always help people find clients.
Yeah, and I think, and by the way, as an aside, I tell everybody this, that it's not. I'm really effective because. Obviously, I said this to you even knowing when you didn't know a lot about sports when we started, and I said, hey, we could be like Brady and Belichick. Do you know who those guys are? Where we can complement each other because, for example, Bill Belichick needs Tom Brady. He needs to be able to criticize him in front of everybody. He needs to be able to say, okay, I need you to learn how to do this. I need you to get, And so if I tell you the day before that, hey, we have a chance to get this great guest, and you're prepared. You're like, yes, I'll do it. You're not like, hey, I'm sorry, I'm playing Doom with Jay in Fortnite. You're like, I'll do it. I'm excited about it.
Yeah,
so that's why I'm lucky. Like it could be lost. Like we're fortunate to be able to do Sonia Sotomayor. And what if you said, no, I don't feel like doing it. There are 8 other judges. Let's wait till we get, Kavanaugh or Gorsuch or Ruth Bader Ginsburg.
Well, and also and also where. We fly to LA for podcasts, we fly to Europe for podcasts, we fly to Panama for podcasts. But the other thing is
it's a great team. Your brains, my typing ability.
Very funny. But you were at a place where performance was bounded, like every place is. 100%. But maybe you moved from a place where success was bounded to a place where success is unbounded. So I'm not saying my podcast success is unbounded, but now you're in an environment where you have many directions and options in front of you.
I pay a tribute to you, and again, I don't want this to sound like Pravda or Russia Today or something, but but no, I think it's, you set a great environment for that, for all of us, and I'm grateful to that, where you create an environment where like, okay, let's do this, or hey, and I've had other people I worked with like that. I remember I liked, there's a guy, Steve Friedman, who started the Today Show, and I remember saying to him, hey, do you think we can do this? And he's like, Steve, we could do whatever we want to do. And that's the right way to get people to think big and to think like a no-limit person.
Yeah, I think it's key.
And that's getting back to, and that's something I picked up from you. Like the whole idea, I want to tell everybody that it does work. I do, I have a waiter's pad here, and I do come up with 10 ideas a day, and I do adopt a lot of your daily practices, not in the creepy single white male way, but it works, and it definitely works.
But also, what's really important is that it's not just this podcast. Like, we help other podcasts. Potentially that could be opportunities. We help. You're sourcing merchandise for this podcast. So it's all these businesses and industries you get more exposed to. What I always find is I've had a lot of either mentors or bosses or whatever in the past 30 years. The worst ones always they're smart and there's something to learn from them, but they always want to clamp down they want to put a ceiling on any success I have, because you can't be more successful than them. Whenever I had an employee at a business, I'm thinking in particular my first businesses, my goal for the employees was for them to eventually start their own businesses and pass me. Because then if you have employees that you're constantly trying to get them to pass you, you're going to have a great business because then
and
your
you
services
actually
are
thought
needed
that
less and
then
less.
it's not revisionist because I'm going to bring up two things.
No,
Yeah.
I'll tell you why I thought that then, because I remember when 4 of my employees defected and took some clients with them, and they started their own business. My business partner was flipping out, like he hated them. He was saying, I want to harm them. I want to destroy their business.
He's now in jail.
and I was like, no, let them do it. And I run into
You felt that way even then.
Yeah. And
why? Because if they don't want to be here, sayonara.
Yeah, and also they were great. We benefited a lot from them. They were our best employees, actually, and we benefited a huge amount from having them around for the prior few years. We had already sold our company by then, but we were still running it for the company that bought us. So I wanted them to be super successful. And I ran into one of them, the main guy, 20 years later or 25 years later. No, sorry, 15 years later. And he said to me, he's got like 100 employees now at his business. He didn't sell it. He stuck with it, and it's a huge business now. He says, whenever I walk along the floor with my employees, I think of 2 people: my commander in the Mossad, and because he was from Israel, and you, because I was his first boss in the city. So it never. And now, of course, I don't care from 20 years later that he did this. I more care that I helped him and I was an inspiration to him.
Well, I feel like you're not going to be able to control people, but I remember one of my favorite interviews when we had Ken Langone, and I was impressed by how he took a lot of pride in the success of like his assistant, and he gave her a lot of attention, or his driver, and that they have a home in a summer home, and that they did financially well, or all those people who started in the mailroom or whatever at Home Depot, and there were 3,000 millionaires. And I said, Ken, remember we said, Ken, this is odd because a lot of people don't praise. They're reluctant to praise somebody else because they're afraid they're not going to get the credit, or they want the credit, or they're afraid they're going to ask for a raise, or whatever myriad reasons they have to not want to acknowledge somebody. And he goes, Steve, those people are sick. But I find those people, unfortunately, more the exception rather than the rule. Like, not everybody is as enlightened as you or Ken are.
And let's say, and Ken said specifically, I'm not, everyone was calling him a self-made billionaire. He said, I'm not self-made at all. I had this, I had, 8,000 people helping me. I had my whole bank helping me. I had everybody at Home Depot helping me, and particularly, and he named the top managers and gave them all the credit. But think about it from 2 sides. If you're the entrepreneur, you don't need credit. You want your employees to feel good and motivated, and you want your clients to feel good and motivated. Like, your clients are trying to protect their jobs too. So you want them to have all the credit. You don't want to take all the credit, because what are you trying to do? Get your client's job? Like, you want your client to be promoted and promoted and promoted so that he keeps hiring you from higher and higher positions with bigger and bigger budgets. So if you're an entrepreneur, you should never want credit. And if you're an employee, this was always the big thing. Everybody warned me when I started the job at HBO. People would come up to me and say, hey, just so you know, your boss is notorious for taking credit from his employees. And so I took that information and I did something with it. I always proactively gave him credit so he wouldn't have to take it.
Oh, wow.
So, and he would get promoted and promoted and promoted, which gave me more and more freedom to do what I wanted to do. And people don't realize.
And it disarms him from feeling like he needs to do it.
Yeah, the one time he felt
her.
The one time he felt I didn't give him credit, he was like upset I almost got demoted. He was upset for like a month at me.
Wow.
So I very strategically gave him credit for everything. Not a single day would go by where I wasn't giving him credit for something, because also I am grateful to him for giving me the freedom he gave me, and that was kind of part of the implicit deal. People should understand what their implicit deals are with the people around them.
And so, getting back to your initial point about the pitfalls of entrepreneurship, there are merits and demerits to every place, right? So, like, that's one of the demerits of a corporate structure where there's, it's a crowded structure, it's politicized, it's, you don't seem to have as much choice, but you always have choice.
And success is probably capped a little tighter than from entrepreneurship. So entrepreneurship, you have many directions to go. So for instance, again, I talk about this first business, we were making websites for record labels, particularly like rap record labels. So we were exposed to the music industry in a very deep way. We were kind of like bringing the music industry online before it was online. And so when we were looking at our choices as a business, we were thinking, hey, we know enough rappers now and we know enough about the music business, we could set up our own record label. So we didn't do that, but that was an option we considered, and we went, let's say, 5 out of 10 steps down that path to explore it. But as an entrepreneur, you can explore more directions. People always say focus, focus, focus. No, you want to look at all of your opportunities. The very best businesses out there switched focus. Twitter, a great example. Not saying they're the best business, but they're obviously a good multi-billion-dollar business. They were originally a podcasting
they were
business.
ahead of their time. A lot of its time.
Yeah, and in mid-00s, they were setting up podcasting software, and just this guy in the corner, Jack Dorsey, is a programmer for them, was making this little SMS, messaging system that they decided to make that the full business. And this is kind of an example, too, of a classic example of like nobody knows anything. Ev Williams offered all the investors, when he decided to focus on the messaging thing, this Twitter app, he offered all the investors their full money back, or they could ride into the new business at like a trivial valuation. And now the company's whatever, billions. 100% of the investors took their money back.
Wow.
All the most professional investors in the Silicon Valley. And then Ev funded Twitter himself, and that's why him and Jack Dorsey and Biz Stone are multi, 10 billionaires.
Wow.
And so that's a side thing, which is that there's no such thing really as an expert, because again, performance is bounded. Success has a luck factor as well. But
another way to put that, like that I thought about that, was like a distinction too, because I think I've felt better in life, when I really just focus on my actions rather than my outcomes, And another way of putting it is, I think, I have expectancy, but I don't have specific expectations. Like I have expectancy that good things are going to happen, but I don't have specific expectations that this is going to happen. My kind of happiness and well-being isn't tied onto a specific result, but just, that there'll be positive results if I continue to work hard and follow a lot of the practices that I've engendered, that I got from you. And I could tell you, I do think the same way that other people are ignited by being around other people. I'll pay you a compliment for the first time, those of you out there. No, but I will, that when you always have a lot of ideas, it's just great. Like, and it does work. It does work, and for example, we have a terrific person making our merchandise, Delilah Garcia, who's great. And, she's terrific. And like, she'll do a lot of things for us. And we say, oh, but then you can do this for other people, and I started to think the way you think.
You start to meta, everything you do, there's like a meta way to think about it, then a meta way to think about that. And,
so I'm glad, I think those are the people you want to be around. Like, you want to be around people who want you to do well. You want to be around people who, who are secure enough and recognize what you were talking about, bound, and I'm about, like, it's limitless what we can do.
I just want
we have a great team here, and if they do well, I'm happy for them. If Nathan or Pam or Jay, and I can name a ton of other people here, if they, Matt or a lot of our other people, or Shanley, if they do a great job, good. I could do other things.
I want to add a couple of things. One is that you focusing on your actions, not your goals. I always say, like, focusing on themes and not
or system
goals. If a system rather than a goal. And there's kind of you could almost look at it mathematically. Like, let's say you had a goal and you're halfway there. Whatever it is, so let's say there's 10 steps to getting your goal and you're on step 5. You might learn something on step 6. By definition, you don't know the information yet of what's going to happen on step 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. So you're going to learn things that might make you intelligently change the goal. So that's why focusing on process almost mathematically is more important than focusing on the goal. And many people realize this in entrepreneurship, that if we just focus on being around good people, which is extremely important, and that's part of the networking aspect too, improving our skills, improving our ability to be persistent in the face of failure and problems, because there's nonstop problems whether you're an entrepreneur or an employee. not necessarily having a goal. Oh, I've got to sell this product to this company, or I've got to sell the company by this point, or I've got to hit 15 million in sales by this year. But just always running a good business today, or if you're an employee, doing all the things you can do, the best you can do, while expanding your opportunities and your education and so on. That's the only important thing.
Well, I like to say, like, again, if you put a plant in a jar, it's going to take the shape of a jar. If you put it in a room, maybe it takes the shape of the whole room, and it blooms even more than you'd ever like it to bloom. But, I think a lot of, I think I know this, trust me, if you spot it, you got it. And I think that we've learned from, Ryan Holiday and Frank Shamrock, who talk about the plus equal minus. I like to mentor other people too, and I'll tell them, people who are stuck in a corporate environment, have a certain mindset, and I'll be very.
But they don't have to be. Like
they don't have to be, but I'll push them, and they're like, "Steve, I'm miserable. You don't understand." I'm like, I kind of do know.
Well, and again, if you're an employee, there's so many things you could gain being an employee.
Yes,
but you might not be an employee at the right place. Like if I had taken a job at J.P. Morgan, that would not have been good for me. I would have been stuck forever being like an IT guy somewhere. I would have just gone crazy.
Yeah.
And so money is not the key, particularly when you're young and don't have as many responsibilities. The key is being able to, set your environment up.
Yeah.
So that you're a plant in the room instead of a plant in the jar.
And I think, as I've gotten older, I'm less inclined to say things as good or bad. You're just gonna say it's not for me. When I was at certain places, yes, some people might like that, okay, it's 5:00, I'm done. And they looked at it like they were a factory worker employee. I didn't have that mindset. I was a neurotic person. I always felt consumed by it. Whether or not I was an employee or a boss, that's just how I was wired. And, something I think I try and work on, to do, but other people like it. Other people have balance, and they're like, or perceived balance, or other people might have kids or family, and they were able to not have to be a perfectionist about it, and not have to, not feel like they were committing malpractice if they weren't always working and doing things. And that's not for me, but it's that's.
But again, there's perception also, which is that they don't have to say, okay, well, now I have kids, I can only, I can't work as hard as everyone else. Doesn't mean work more hours. Working smarter is better than working harder.
Oh, sure.
And
I had a problem with a lot of people. It wasn't so much what they did outside of it, but when they were there, I found that they're chatting with other people, or, and I would remember thinking like, hey, these people are paying you, whether or not you like it, whether you think you deserve more money or not, and I recall feeling like I never liked somebody that much at work that I'd be like chatty patty with them all day, or her, and I devalued it. There's a job, and I took it as a privilege and a responsibility.
I write about this in the Rich Employee, which is that, and I'm curious what listeners think about this statistic, but my gut told me, based on working, back in the day and talking to other people, my gut tells me in an 8-hour workday, people actually work about 2 hours of that 8. Because because there's meetings that are useless.
Yeah.
There's cigarette breaks that people would take.
Yeah.
There's lunch breaks that would be like 1 to 2 hours.
And then there's, should we have Chinese? Should we have Thai? We had that yesterday.
And people
too much cumin in my salad. Yeah.
People would leave earlier than they would leave in an entrepreneurial environment. So even as an employee, again, if you just work a half hour more than everyone, you've just added like 25% of your productivity.
But we had an author here, and I remember she came by herself, and I felt like publicists with her should have come there. And you said, Steve, well, they're busy. They have this. And I said, well, if she were Jennifer Lopez, wouldn't they be with her? And I do think, and in their minds, I feel like some of these people, probably thinking, well, I'm really busy. And, again, the cynic knows the cost of everything, the value of nothing. Had they come with her, they would have met us, and they would have got other great people on this great podcast, which, again, I have a friend, Michael Rockin, who said that perhaps in the vein of HBO, we shouldn't call this a podcast, we should call it an audio experience, which perhaps we should.
I like that.
Yeah, Michael Rockin, good fella.
Full credit goes to him.
Yes. Unlike Eric Kessler, I'm not going to take credit for it. Your idea.
No, Eric Kessler came up with it. It's not TV, it's HBO. So I just
Our audio experience.
just to summarize this, there's a lot of takeaways. One is I'm not trashing entrepreneurship. I'm actually saying go for it, but just don't have rose-colored glasses. Like there's a lot of hard things about being an entrepreneur, but the payoff is, it's more likely that your success is unbounded in an entrepreneurial. The more entrepreneurial your environment is, the more. I'm not saying be an employee versus be an entrepreneur. I'm saying the more entrepreneurial your environment is, the more unbounded your success is. Now that could be at a corporation, or it could be that at your own company, or it could be working for yourself. The other thing I'm saying is that you don't have to be an entrepreneur. You can also be very successful as an employee. And we've had many people on this podcast too who rose up the ranks as an employee. Michael Ovitz is an example.
Well, he effectively started his own company, like at CAA. So
okay. So he was an entrepreneur.
Was incredibly
Beth
successful.
Comstock is a great example where she was vice chair of GE and crashed through many glass ceilings and was a great success, or is a great success. So people sometimes say, "Oh, I've got to be an entrepreneur because then I'm going to have freedom." It's like you said earlier. You no matter where you move, you're taking yourself
wherever
with
you go,
you.
you take yourself with you.
And so when you go from an employee to entrepreneur, you still have to have it's not like you're going to go from an employee mindset to an entrepreneur mindset. You should have the entrepreneur mindset or the freedom mindset while you're an employee. That's how you'll be successful enough to make the leap to entrepreneurship.
Yeah. Well, I think, a few things. Like, I think in Paradise Lost, they talked about how you can make a hell out of heaven and a heaven out of hell. But I think, like, you have to know thyself. Like, you have to know who you are. And some people don't like to take risks. And, my dad was a physician and he was very successful at it, but he saw himself as a piecemeal worker. He knew he had to do colonoscopies. He was a gastroenterologist and he was terrific at it. He was great with patients. He was a caregiver. But he saw himself, that was the way he envisioned himself. He didn't see himself as this exalted intellect he felt like, and I remember he resented people I've had in my career, like, who looked at what they did as an annuity. He looked at himself as a worker. He had to see these patients every day. If he didn't work, he didn't get paid. And
I just have to say about your dad, because I've spoken to him when I was helping someone with a medical situation. Your dad, who's retired, is just a really knowledgeable, wise person about medicine because of all those years he dedicated to helping people.
He loved it. I mean, he loved doing what he was doing. So again, he knew himself. He knew from a very young age that was what he wanted to do. He had a care for people. He was different from a lot of people. I mean, there's distinctions among everybody in every profession. Like he definitely liked it. And like I've said before, successful people focus on the flowers, not the weeds. You could look at the same way entrepreneurship, you can look at medicine and be like, geez, there's a lot of paperwork. You have disloyal patients. You got insurance people over there. You got nurses you got to deal with, and that's, I imagine, life, obviously, in any situation. But if you enjoy it enough, we had, a bunch of Navy SEALs here. We had Brandon Webb, we had Jocko Willink, and they had to endure David Goggins. And
they were like the ultimate employees. They had to follow every command from their commanding officer. And now they're all entrepreneurs and living an entrepreneurial lifestyle.
But they had to go through a lot of pain to get where they wanted to go. As did you, as did I,
So I think there's a lot to unpack from the past hour, but I'll point out a couple of things. One is we did this entire podcast based off of you asking me what my 10 ideas of the day were. That shows you the value of coming up with 10 ideas and really thinking about them and having them be a little different than just the average mundane cliches. Yeah. And then there's a lot of stuff about what is the meaning of success, whether you're an entrepreneur or an employee. What's the meaning of good performance? What other factors other than performance contribute to success, whether it's financial or happiness or whatever. So I would love it if somebody took the top 10 things they got from this podcast and sent it to me or tweeted it to me. And I'm sure we answered a bunch of questions that were in the
let
Q&A.
me make it easy for you out there. One of the top 10 things is that James doesn't walk a lot. So he walks
Only 500 feet a day.
Exactly.
I need to walk more.
Exactly.
We unpack that.
The Christopher Columbus statue in Columbus Circle walked more last month. I don't even need to go to Google Maps to look at it.
I'm gonna add that to my bit on this topic.
And come see James at Stand Up New York.
And let's we still have all the questions from the Q&A.
Yeah.
We answered some of them I could see, but anyway, and this one we can call entrepreneur versus employee. They're both great and they both suck. Here's how to make the best of both. And then let's do another one. So
Yeah.
thanks for joining me, Steve. On
Thank
this
you so much
podcast.
for having me. I will say for you listeners out there and who taking part in our audio experience, initially I said I was going to be like Penn and Teller, where I wasn't going to say that much, and then I defied those expectations by myself.
I know. Often I would have something I was thinking of saying, and you'd
motor
keep
mouth,
talking, and then I
a motor
forgot what
mouth.
I was going to say. No, it's
Yeah.
okay. Your stuff's
One of my friends
valuable.
said, one time I didn't talk to Steve for a month, and I didn't want to interrupt him. So I know, I'm motor mouth. Sorry.
I gotta write that one down. All right. Thanks very much, Jay. Thanks. Bye.
AI might be the most important new computer technology ever. It's storming every industry, and literally billions of dollars are being invested. So buckle up. The problem is that AI needs a lot of speed and processing power, so how do you compete without costs spiraling out of control? It's time to upgrade to the next generation of the cloud, Oracle Cloud Infrastructure, or OCI. OCI is a single platform for your infrastructure, database, application development, and AI needs. OCI has 4 to 8 times the bandwidth of other clouds, offers one consistent price instead of variable regional pricing, and of course, nobody does data better than Oracle. So now you can train your AI models at twice the speed and less than half the cost of other clouds. If you want to do more and spend less, like Uber, 8x8, and Databricks Mosaic, take a free test drive of OCI at oracle.com/advance. That's oracle.com/advance. oracle.com/advance.